So I think we'll start with, sorry about arriving a few minutes late because I was there in the other session finishing up a talk here. So as we wait for both Dr. Santosh and Dr. Namrata to join us, may I invite all the expert panel people who are there to come forward, please. I think Dr. Gopal Raju and Dr. Basak will also join us shortly. Do we have Dr. Murthy, Dr. Srinivas Prasad, Dr. Modini, Dr. Raman. Yeah, so as I think we have less people on the dais, I would be happy to have you both on the dais with me so that we can engage in a lively discussion. So, Dr. Sudhakar Poti, Manjot Kaur, Dr. Madhuri, Dr. Shashidhar, Dr. Vijay Bhaskar Gujala, Dr. Monica, Kajal Priya, Anusuva, she just said she's unwell, so she's coming back shortly. Dr. Arvind Roy and Dr. Samira. You could come on to the first thing so that you could ask us questions. So if you're right here, then the interaction becomes much easier for us. Dr. Samira, Dr. Tripura. Yeah? Please, yeah, okay. Everyone, please join us on the stage, please. Come. Oh, okay, perfect, yes. So welcome to this IJO Livewire session, and this is going to be the inaugural session for the IJO Livewire of the season, where we hope to take on a live interaction with all the teachers and the trainees on how to go about successful writing of research papers here. So this is basically an interactive session so that you can come to us with your queries and ask us how to get across hurdles which you are facing when you are writing a paper, or to take advice or to enhance the way you have written a paper, be it a case report, be it a correspondence, be it a brief report, or be it an original article. So I want you to bring to us your practical problems so that the experts can deal with you. And this we are planning to hold state-wise, region-wise, so that we could cover smaller groups of people who are training postgraduate students and residents who can talk to us. It will be a short session of perhaps an hour, and we'll come out and roll out the program to you shortly. And I welcome Professor Namrata Sharma and Dr. Santosh Hunawar. I think they need no introduction. One of the country's best researchers, pride of India. They all figure in the Stanford list of the topmost or highly cited researchers from India, and that gives us a matter of pride here. And I welcome Dr. Namrata to deliver her keynote address on something which we all want to master and learn, quick tips on what your videos should have.
Okay, so thank you, Vanati, for starting this. I'm sure it is going to be a huge success. And of course, Livewire itself is it's a very energizing kind of a term. So I would be talking to you about how to make videos. And there are no financial interest in any of the products which are mentioned in the presentation. Now, basically, I'm going to be talking about if you have to submit videos and make good videos, how do you go about it? So first and foremost, take consent for recording the video, and I think that consent, it's gone. And that consent we already take when you give consent forms to the, give consent forms to the patients. There it's always there, you know, that your video will be recorded. So that is important. Then collect all the pre-treatment or the pre-operative material. That is very important. To make a good video, you have to plan not from the video itself, but much before the video. So collection of the pre-treatment or the pre-operative material is important. Then recording the actual surgery or concept is very important. Once you've done that, you have to write the script first. You don't go and quickly edit the video. You don't do it like that. You write the script first, then you do audio recording, and then in the end you do video recording, and then you fit audio with your video. So if you are looking for video awards, then you have to check for the film festivals. In the same calendar year, for more societies, you can submit the video. So for 1 year, you can submit the video in various societies, and none of these have, you know, anything against it. The time of the format, time specifications vary a little bit, but really not much. For instance, in some places it will say 8 minutes, some it will say 7, some it will say 10 minutes. So safest is to do about 8 minutes, and that will possibly fit everywhere. Now recording is important, but you should have a great idea, whether it is a novel technique, unusual complication, diagnostic or a surgical dilemma, educational value or teaching component. And you submit in these categories, and you have to check for the categories. Sometimes your concept is common, but it is good. So you change the category. Don't put it into cataract, because you know it's not going to come in there because there are going to be too many entries. So put it into educational video, or put it into a complication kind of a video. So where your competition is going to be less in that particular category, try and put it there. Then all the relevant raw material has to be collected, which includes good pre-op and post-op clinical photos, investigations such as ocular and systemic. Just to give example, if it's a cornea case, then topography, AIOCMTC pictures, specular microscopy, confocal pictures, post-op if you have done, say, for a corneal transplant or done a biopsy, then histopath, cultures, etc., etc. Then I think it is very important, and Vanati is going to agree with me, we've all been taught in RP Center to record everything. So for instance, I wouldn't make a side port if the recording is not on. And now, fortunately, everything is there in the operating microscope itself. You don't have to put a recorder separately. But even if you have to, record everything. Because if you want to show a complication, it may happen and then you may not have recorded it. No point doing it after it has happened. You actually have to record it happening. So record all your cases, and I've put that twice, record all your cases, because otherwise also it helps you to review, and review that day only. If you leave it for another day, you will never review. Then you will only hunt when you get a particular topic to see, you know, where your video is. And all your cases should be recorded on high quality, high definition videos. Good surgical microscope is important. Surgery may take longer than anticipated if you are recording electively, and I think that is something you should be prepared for. Surgery should look neat, and you have to check the microscope recorder settings, as very large files sometimes may not be saved. And instruments and ancillary material should be in order. Use designated instruments for appropriate surgical steps. Don't use a crescent blade to do a lamellar dissector, because that's generally not accepted. Use a lamellar dissector to do lamellar dissection, because that is generally what is accepted. Then no extraneous or unwanted things should be there in the field, and there should not be pooling or too much of fluid or too much of blood, because if you to show a recording, it should look neat. Then ensure centration, because that shouldn't happen that only half the eye is coming. Focus on the structure that you are working on. Sometimes you may be working on the pterygium, which is on the right extreme or the left extreme, and only your central part is showing, but where you're actually working is on the right side or the left side. Everything, your work thing or workplace should be central. Limbus to limbus for intraocular videos is the good rule to go. Appropriate magnification is required. Appropriate brightness and contrast is required. Keep an eye on the focus and the clarity of the video, and ensure that the recording is being done, because sometimes you think you are recording and then you've completed the case, and then you are in for a disappointment because you realize that it never recorded. Because just like time never comes back, your own recording of the case, or the case you've done, or the tips that are there, or the complication that is there, may not come back again. It is important to write a script. So generally time limit is 8 minutes that they will give you. Plan for 7.5 minutes. If you're sending in for a competitive thing, you cannot exceed the time. You cannot exceed by 1 second also. So plan for 30 seconds less. Make a storyboard or a screenplay, build up a story. Sometimes you have to build up things, they are not there. Introduction should not be too long, because when the judges are judging it, or when you're playing in a competitive session, judges know it all. So you don't have to introduce to them, in a lengthy manner. The main body of the description has to be there, conclusions has to be there. And if you use 1-page Arial font double space, that is your 2.5 minute script. So if it is 2.5 minute script, that means you should not exceed 2.5 pages of Arial font double space. And edit that spoken script just like you would edit a précis that you were taught in school. So if you can convey more and speak less, or in minimum number of words, then that is the best thing to do it. Then audio recording is important. Now what happens is that audio preferably should be by English speaking person. Tutor the speaker in ophthalmic terminology if you are taking a professional help, because keratoplasty, they may not say keratoplasty, they might pronounce it something differently. Then get one sentence done 2 to 3 times, because when you are doing the audio recording, one particular sentence, if you don't like it that way, you can always delete it. But you can't come back and ask that professional speaker whom you've already paid to do it again for you. Then do not use slangs or abbreviations. Important thing is, when you're sending especially for international competition, what generally the judges would see or the delegates would see would be what you're doing under the operating microscope, and that doesn't change whether it is America or it is Europe or it is Australia. That is not going to change, or it is India. What changes is the speaker. So if you speak and you send it to say Australia, then they might not be able to gauge the slang that you have or the way you speak. It's going to be different for all countries. So if you get a good speaker to speak who's professional, then it's in their kind of a dialect, then it kind of helps to convey better. Not that you can't speak, you can speak also. I'm not saying that you should not speak, but if you are sending it for competition, it is better that a professional speaks, because that is the only thing that will change from surgeon to surgeon. The surgery will not change. You will be the most competitive surgeon that you're doing the surgery, and that's not going to be different from other videos. Then video editing is important. Spend time with a video editor or do it yourself. Sometimes you need to put animations, and that's why you may need professional help. 3D simulations may be required. You can use any editing software, and like I said, don't spend too much time on introduction or defining a problem or review of literature, because that is known to them. And you don't have to glamorize yourself, don't have to show yourself, operating, or don't have to start talking yourself, but you have to glamorize the concept that you want to convey. So this is just to show, I don't know whether this will open or not, but when you are doing a script, for every single thing, there has to be a filler. So I'm just giving you one example. See, for instance, we were doing this. So you say that intracorneal ring segment implantation is a useful technique. So there has to be a figure to it. Or you say the second line, any line, you've seen NDTV, how it goes, like this, like this, like this, like this. If you make it too slow, people are not going to, you are not going to be catching people's attention. So everything has to move very fast. And for every single thing, there is infection. Every single thing should have a filler. It could be a photograph, it could be a video, it could be an animation, it could be a sketch. So this is one line and this has a filler. This is one line and this is a filler. This is one line and this has a filler. So everything moves very fast, just like TV channels. So, sorry. Oh God, where am I? So that is how you have to do it. Now this I'm just showing you that, you know, how when you make a movie, you send it to two, three conferences or 3-4 conferences in the same year, and then if that movie is good, it will get awarded each year in multiple places. So once you make it, you keep it, you save it for 1 year, and you send it in that same calendar year to all the societies. It could be AIOS, it could be ISCAS, it could be AAO, APCRS. So once done is done for 1 year. So you start from which time? You start, say, from January, send it to ASCAS, ISCAS, AAO, send it to all the possible societies in one particular year. Now sometimes you have to, I don't know whether this will... Now this is just to show that we did this rotational autokeratoplasty, and this was done by Dr. Tushar Agarwal. Again, you can see somebody else is speaking. We've taken a professional help in this. And then, I think the movie is not coming. In this, we showed on animations because it was very difficult to otherwise show it, to simulate how a rotational keratoplasty is going to be helping you. I think these movies are not going to run anyway. They are in a different format. Okay, so sometimes the things could be devastating, like this was an expulsive hemorrhage, and if this expulsive hemorrhage was not recorded from beforehand, you would have never picked it up because it was so fast that everything came out. So it is important that you record every single thing, that you do. It could be a simple cataract also, but do record it. Because once recorded, it is going to stay with you. But once it is gone and there is something which has happened, you will never get it back. So thank you very much for your kind attention. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to take.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think that was a very lucid explanation of how you would really go about preparing for making a award-winning quality video. And as Dr. Santosh Honawar is setting up his talk, I think ma'am is here to address all your queries. Speak into the mic, please.
Yes, one more thing, when you're doing the background music, don't take a copyrighted background music because then there can be a problem.
Regarding the consent for the video, surgical video, as we said, we can't expect the complication. Like that, if in our institute, what we do is, we will take the consent like in the OPD itself. Your information is used for the teaching purpose.
Yeah.
Will it be sufficient for the...
Yeah, that is sufficient. If you say it is going to be used for educational purposes, your photograph of your eye or your investigations thereof, I think that kind of a consent, if you take, that is perfectly all right.
Another point which I would like to point out is they also use captions from other people's publications in their videos, which I commonly see in IJO video submissions, which is not actually correct. It amounts to plagiarism when you're using images and tables of somebody else's work in your video. So that's something which is commonly, I think they're probably doing it because they're not aware of it, but that's something which needs to be avoided. Thank you very much, ma'am. And yes.
With permission from the original author, they can use now.
With permission, you can take. With permission, you can take, and you can curtsy so and so. That is perfectly all right, and it is acceptable.
I think there is also a format by which the copyright permission has to be written particularly. So they have to go back and read that properly, and it has to be put the same way they have the wordings exactly they want to put it, which is commonly missed, and it's just written like copyright permission obtained, and that's put within brackets, and that is not an acceptable way of writing. And a copy of the permission letter is also to be shared with the editorial office for safekeeping in the event of any concerns which might arise later. So this is something which needs to be addressed as well. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
ma'am, for that
Thank
wonderful, fantastic video. We will now move on to, we will move on to Dr. Santosh Unavar's talk here, and he will now speak to us on tips for successful manuscript publication.
Thank you, Vanati. You asked me to speak on tips for successful manuscript publication, and I'd like to concentrate on one aspect of it, get to know the journal processes and reviewer perspectives. This is a major aspect for manuscript publication, apart from, of course, writing. If I delve into how to write a manuscript, that will be too much for a short session of this. That's a session by itself. So I'm going to address one important part of manuscript publication, that is understanding the processes of a journal and reviewer perspectives. Finally, it all boils down to this. This could be my conclusion slide as well. You have to do relevant research and produce usable knowledge. Every journal aims at that, and every author should aim at that. This is the crux of publication. Something that is usable in your clinical practice the very next day, or something that would spawn more research, finally leading on to something that is useful, even in terms of a new product, new surgical procedure, new knowledge itself, or new understanding of a disease process. This is fashion, where mismatch is acceptable, right? But when you talk about a publication, it is all about finding the right match. The author should find the right match in the journal, and journal should find a right match in terms of the manuscript. So both are looking for a good match, and submission process is nothing but a matchmaking process where each one finds the best match for himself or herself. Journals typically want to publish groundbreaking new research. This is known. Otherwise, why are journals for? Every journal has one selfish motive, at least, of improving their impact factor. It's important because journals are assessed that way. If you know that you're assessed in a particular way, you want to have that in the frame of your processes, that I want to have a better impact factor. But the authors also want to publish in high impact journals. That is one more reason why journals want to publish articles which will have a higher citation. So both are dependent on each other in this process. That is the reason why journals have a rigorous selection process. They cannot accept all the articles. In fact, even IJO, which is a national journal, international journal, has about 20% acceptance. Some of the journals have 10% or 5% acceptance, which is understandable because they cannot accept all these articles. And authors need to match their work to a specific journal to maximize the chance of acceptance. For example, if a particular journal were not to publish basic science research, then there is no point submitting it to that journal and wasting time of both. This is layered screening, 3-layered screening, which most of the journals follow, which is true of IJO as well, where from submission to acceptance there are 3 layers. One is assessment by either a senior editor or a group of young, I would say, associate editors or assistant editors, then editor, then selection of reviewers, then approval by reviewers, approval by the associate or the section editor, and finally approval by the editor. So this layered screening is very important in a particular journal processes. So when a manuscript is submitted, it undergoes what is called a technical check. This could be done, as done in many international journals, by staff who are librarians who are specifically trained in the journal processes. What they look at is, does the manuscript have all the components of the article that you're submitting it for? Some of the journals want a précis. If it is not there, or if it is not there in the right number of words, or if the abstract is not formatted properly, if it's a structured abstract, it has to be formatted that way. The number of words have to be conforming to the journal style. The references will have to conform to the journal style. The pictures will have to be formatted in a particular way. Are the pictures of good resolution? All these are typically checked in an international journal by the editorial staff. They are not ophthalmologists, they are not doctors, they are not scientists. But in IJO, we don't have that kind of staff in India, so the assistant editors or associate editors do that job, which is actually better because we have a better understanding of ophthalmology. But at the same time, it creates a burden on the editorial team that they have to check things which otherwise are checked by, say, trained individuals who are non-ophthalmologists or trained librarians. Then it goes to basic scientific review. In a typical international journal, it would go to assistant editors or the section editor for a basic scientific review, at which time they look at everything else apart from formatting, font size, etc., and look at the presentability of the manuscript overall, whether it can go through the review process, or if it is not at all fit for further review process, it is rejected at this first level of screening itself. So when you submit to say ophthalmology or IOVS, sometimes you get a rejection within 48 hours. You keep wondering, how could the review process would have taken place in 48 hours and how can I get a rejection in 48 hours? That's because your manuscript has been rejected at the first level of screening itself. And that is actually a formal process. Somebody would have read it and he would have or she would have recommended that the manuscript is not fit enough for further review process. That's why it's been rejected. But we are not aware of it. So we keep thinking that, okay, we are from India, that's why our article is rejected in 24 or 48 hours, which is not really true. Somebody would have gone through it. Then if it passes this stage, sometimes it can go back to the authors for optimization. This is important because if reviewers are presented 100 manuscripts and 70 of them do not conform to, say, even grammatical standards or scientific standards of writing, then reviewers really object. Some of the reviewers are very severe. Why does the editorial board send us manuscripts which are not even fit for review? They get angry with us. So we have to have a process of optimization where the manuscript is sent back to the author, correct these things before you send it to us, then we will send it for review. So the material is good, but the manuscript has some flaws. We don't want that flawed manuscript to go to the reviewer so that the reviewer gets overshadowed by the flaws in the manuscript rather than the science in the manuscript. So it goes back to the author corrects all the flaws and then sends it back to us. So in an optimized condition, we send it to the reviewer. So that process also happens, background. We would not be aware of it. So that's why I'm telling you all this, because when you send the manuscript to a journal, if it is already optimized, then your job is half done because it straight away can go to a reviewer. So follow all the guidelines of a journal. Read the guidelines of a journal, and manuscript should be formatted to conform to the guidelines. Now there are certain reasons for editorial rejection. Now this editorial rejection is the first level of rejection where the manuscript is not reviewed at all in a formal way. What are the reasons for manuscript rejection unrelated to manuscript quality? Quality may be good, but it is still rejected. That's because of manuscript journal mismatch. IJO does not print case reports. It has a separate journal for case reports. So if you send a case report specifically for IJO, it may be rejected. Similarly, ophthalmology may not accept case reports except for pictorial essays, and that may be rejected. Not in the scope of the journal. Suppose you send us a manuscript which is heavy on psychology, patient psychology or patient counseling to an ophthalmology journal, which may be remotely related to glaucoma. Well, it may not be a good match for a clinical journal. Space constraints. So if a journal gets 500 submissions a month and they have the capacity to publish 50, they would be very strict about the quality. High submission volume, low acceptance rates relates to space constraint. Anyway, similar or recent submission or publication that is exactly similar case or a case series or an original article has come to the journal already and it is in the pipeline for a review, or it's been recently published. You do not want to duplicate that because the second article that gets published on the same concept may not get citation at all. No IRB approval or not a registered prospective study. So this is a one major ground for rejection. There is a rule currently that all the prospective studies, including thesis, must be registered with a competent authority before it is published. So if it is not conforming to that, or if you haven't provided the registration number, even on asking, then it is rejected. Related to manuscript quality, not compliant to the journal style, poor writing or organization, obsolete concept, lack of originality or significance, poor rationale. This is understandable that journals would not want these articles. Flawed methodology itself, poor interpretation of statistics. And if you have done a clinical study without any basic or translational information to back up, you have suddenly brought in a drug which is unheard of. There are no animal studies, there is no lab studies, and you have suddenly used it in human eyes without any prior background evidence that that drug could be used. It's a very good ground for rejection. So you cannot do that unless you have background information which is culled from the literature. That's just the flow that I just mentioned. Now what is peer review? you wonder sometimes as an author as to who are these peer reviewers? Are they us? Are they some aliens? Do we know them? Well, they could be somebody who's sitting right next to you right now. We don't know them because it's a double-blinded process. They are us. It is nothing but evaluation of work done by one or more people of similar competence to the producers of the work. They're called peers. That means if somebody is at 0 level or 1, I'll say, okay, level 1 of academic competence, peer review would include somebody at the same level, maybe 1, maybe who is slightly basic, that's an assistant editor, maybe who is at level 2 or 3. So it includes a group of people who are around, the average of which their competence would come to your competence, something of that sort. So imagine that your article would go to a senior resident. Of course, senior resident is competent to review from his perspective, but at the same time, a professor can also review our article. So average of it would be the competence of the person who has written the article. Why is it required? It is a form of self-regulation. It maintains the standards of quality, improves performance, and provides credibility. And it is a process that is accepted process that is used to determine an academic paper's suitability for publication. It's not as difficult as this. People think that your article will be battered. Sometimes it is true. Reviewers can be very severe on a manuscript. Their criticism can be very harsh, even leading to discouragement. But, well, that's not always true. Majority of reviewers are very kind and nice, and they would like to help you out, and they would like to improve the quality of the manuscript. So you should take it positively. And they all have a background of these core values of peer review which they want to follow. But it is understandable, it is agreeable that humans are all not equal and everybody is not ethical, and some of the reviewers may actually use your information to produce a manuscript of their own. They may not have the idea that, okay, this is a good work. So if they have 100 cases of the same sort, of which you have presented only 50, they would say, okay, I have a larger series, let me publish mine. They may want to delay your manuscript. All that is there. They're part of human flaws, and you can always flag this. If you think that your rejection is unjustified, you can always write to the editorial or ignore that journal and send it to a different journal. So this is covered. So in IJO and majority of journals, review is double-blind. But the editor knows who the author is and who the reviewer is, but the reviewer will not know who the author is, and authors will not know who the reviewer is. That is the double-blind process. It's not triple-blind. Editor will obviously know because he has to or she has to know. Now, what do reviewers finally give you? Reviewers can give you scoring. Reviewers can give you a kind of a summary of what is required by the journal, but they answer these questions which I already elaborated on. Is what is the purpose? Is the purpose clear and is it important? Is the work novel and original? Are the conclusions supported by the data? You cannot have general conclusions like saying that glaucoma is the common cause of blindness. That's not the conclusion. Conclusion should be based on the study. There should not be no general statement in the conclusion. If I say chemotherapy in retinoblastoma, I would say that would have led to these results, but not generally talking about chemotherapy is good for retinoblastoma. That's not conclusion. So conclusion should be based on the data. Are the results important? Are there any ethical questions? If somebody submits a data of 1000 OSSN from a secondary center, I would be very suspicious about that, because that is not the incidence of OSSN. Are there any flaws and mistakes found? Should anything be done, added or removed? Does the author demonstrate a knowledge of prior work in the field? That means your review of literature should be good, table should be adequate. How might the article be improved? And will the community find the article useful? These are the questions that the reviewers answer to himself or herself, and then finally verbalize it. And they send comments to author and to the editor. Sometimes when you get a rejection or a revision, you'll be wondering why are comments so less, but still my article has been rejected. That's because the reviewer would have chosen to comment to the editor and not to the author. Once the reviewer chooses to comment to the editor, you cannot reveal it to the author. That is a limitation of the review process. So editor can reword it or rephrase those comments. Editor has a liberty to tell the author, these are the reasons why your article has been rejected, but he cannot summarily provide the private comments of the reviewer to the author. That is not done. So this part is something that is done by the editor. So when a review process happens, there are three general outcomes. Acceptance without modification. It is not impossible, very rare, or the only person who I know of whose articles were accepted without any modification any number of times is Frederick Jacobiec, who is no longer with us. He was in Harvard and his articles were never ever rejected. His articles were always accepted without a re-review because he used to write so well, not because of his reputation. Revision is one of the common outcomes. Rejection is the most common outcome. Then you could have two types of revisions. One is major revision and second is minor revision. Major revision with re-review. That means you have revised, it goes back to the reviewers. Then the final chance of acceptance is about 60 to 70%. You have revised, you cannot be guaranteed that it will be accepted. Major revision without a re-review. That means it is nearly perfect, has some negative aspects which need to be filled in. 90 to 100% chance of acceptance. Minor revision is nearly accepted. So this is how the journal send out the revision requests. Then when an article has come to you for major or minor revision, you should carefully consider reviewer comments and should make 3 columns. In the first column, you would just mention reviewer 1, comment 1, and in the second column, you should mention how you have addressed or explained the concern in limited number of words. References, if you have not addressed that reviewer concern, what justification you have to have not addressed the reviewer concern. And in the third column, you have to mention in which page and which column and which line have you addressed that concern and highlight that particular aspect in the revised manuscript. So the reviewer readily goes to page number 22, paragraph 2, line 3. Your line is already highlighted, so reviewer doesn't waste time and doesn't get lost in what exactly is the change. That is exactly how you have to send your revisions. Your responses will go back to the reviewers. You should be very nice, polite to the reviewers despite the reviewers not having been polite to you. So you have to be nice. Thank you for your comments which are very relevant. I understand your comments, but I have these issues. Because of these issues, I haven't addressed your comments. So you have to be very nice and gentle. Reviewers have their ego. So do we. Now, finally, at the end of the review process, your manuscript becomes empowered. From a basic car, it goes to a fully loaded car, or you know the power of transformation, right? Closer home, this is the power of transformation. So your manuscript, which is very, very basic, can transform itself into something which is very powerful just because of the review process and because of compliance. So I already covered the reasons for rejection. I will not go over it, but this was a survey which showed that poor quality of writing of the manuscript is one of the major causes for rejection. So you should concentrate on quality of the manuscript. Ethics is very, very important consideration for rejection. Every journal currently passes the manuscripts through the process of, I would say this is software that is used. Plagiarism check is mandatory. Sometimes it can be very high, so obviously it should be rejected. But we should understand that review articles can have a higher plagiarism indexed on the software because review articles would include definitions, diagnostic criteria, etc. So when a plagiarism is done by the journal or whoever does it, they should have a full knowledge of the software that they're using for this check. Otherwise, it can throw up abnormal data. For example, when I do plagiarism check for an article, I would disable that the check should not include references, check should not include phrases which are less than 5 words, because those are definitions and part of standard statements that cannot be included in the check. So some of the rejections may be based on wrong check of plagiarism. Rejection opens new avenues. You should never sit on a rejection. Within the same week, it has to go to a different journal with all the deficiencies addressed. Should you appeal a decision? Usually no. If the grounds for rejection are very justifiable, you don't appeal it. But occasionally, well, you are sure that your manuscripts should find a chance in the journal and your manuscript is of good quality, you are complied to all the reviewers' requests, all the editorial requests, yet it is rejected, then you have a case for appealing. You should appeal, you should never sit quiet, because every journal has a responsibility towards the author as much of responsibility it has to the publisher and also to the journal itself. So author's responsibilities are important for a journal to carry out. You should appeal, and the editor is bound to then take a different decision based on reviewer's justification and the author's justification, or they can even get it re-reviewed. Rejection is norm in academic publication because 80% of the manuscripts get rejected, but persistence is the key, and finally you will find the right match. Thank you so much.
Thank you too much, Dr. Santosh. I think I still learn from all your talks to become a better editor from your experiences.
You're already great.
Yeah. Thank you. And if you have time, can you join us on the dais for a few questions, or you need to go
I'll take the questions.
Yeah. I have one particular question from you from what I am facing. I think in Indian scenarios, most of the original articles coming from many of the teaching colleges and centers, private centers also, are limited by the time frame which is available to them to do the thesis work here. So because of which largely the sample size is the bare minimum. It's always centers around 33, 35, 32, and that's a huge setback for Indian research, because we know when this is sent to any international journal, the first thing on basis on which it's rejected is the sample size is too small.
Yes.
It might be just adequate, the basic size needed for that study to go through, or several times it doesn't even conform to that mandate. But IJO, by and large, we do give a leverage, and if you find that, I think we do accept a lot of, if the concepts are new, and if it is acceptable, then we do take something which has a sample size of just 33, 35. How would you advise that we approach this angle now that IJO has reached a level where we are now wanting to move it into something akin to ophthalmology or AJO? So this is a particular concern which I am facing, because I have students who are wanting to publish their research. It's not going to go into an international journal other than IJO because of this flaw which they have. It's not a flaw really, but because of the constraints.
Right. So I think it depends on the rarity of the condition. I mean, over 25 years, I have 48 cases of rhabdomyosarcoma. That's it. All right. So when I send it to, say, OPRS journal, they say it's a small number. But Shields have just 28 cases. They are the largest oncology service. So it is a rare condition. In a rare condition, it's very difficult to accumulate larger series. Then the only way I can accumulate that is by doing a multicentric study, getting cases from here, there, everywhere, and pulling up data, which may not always be feasible because data collection is very, very erratic. So that is something that the editor should be aware of, is that rarity of the condition and the feasibility of us doing a larger series. Second, possibly, is that some of these articles can be taken as pilot studies if they are prospective studies. Well, we know it is a pilot study, there is a problem with the data, but it is a new concept, or it throws out some new information. Based on that, somebody can take up that idea and do a larger study. Third is that possibly you should look at the power of the study to address that particular question, not go by the number itself. If they're addressing a particular question, say safety, to address that question and answer that reliably, what should be the minimum number that is required, or the power of the study that a statistician can easily calculate based on the information that is available. With this, I think we should be able to screen out articles which are really not useful to anybody versus articles may have some potential use to somebody.
I think any qualified statistician, only thing we have to give him a proper inputs about the incidence and then the...
Yes. So if the statistician has an ophthalmic background, they already, for example, the statistician that I work with has all that data already in his system. He goes through PubMed more than us. So with that information, they can tell you what is the power of the study to address this particular question. So with that in mind, you can already take a decision. In fact, when I write an article, I ask him, is the number sufficient, or should I not even consider it? Maybe I revisit that topic after 5 years when I have better number or better follow-up. So they can really give you good data.
I think one of the very important aspects for before you think about publishing a study is when you're planning the study, that you will have to look at the sample size being adequate, especially if you're doing a prospective study. The sample size is very, very crucial. So I do find a lot of them, after having, say, perhaps done 20 flak surgeries, and then say, okay, I'm going to go and publish my experience with flak surgery. It doesn't work that way. You do a retrospective analysis of something which is already widely published, then there should be some new message, and
more important, your sample should be adequate for that.
Absolutely.
And a retrospective of some commonly done procedure, the sample size needs to be really
Very,
large.
very large,
If
yes.
you're going to draw statistical conclusions from your experience. And that becomes a basis for rejection. And several times I find the authors being very annoyed with the reviewers and with the editors saying, you have rejected, I've sent you 75 cases of what I have done. But they don't realize the sample calculation does not work retrospectively. And as Sir rightly pointed out, you will have to look at the power of your study. And if the power of the study calculated is really enough to statistically address or draw a statistical conclusion from your clinical data.
Yeah. Only suggestion is that if you hold more of author workshops, online author workshops, telling them these are the reasons why we may reject an article, they have a better understanding as to how to submit in future. So the more author workshops you hold, even if the attendance is few,
Yes.
I think
But
the
I
quality
think
of
it does take the message to the target audience, which
Yes.
will help us to
Yeah,
improve.
yeah.
Yes, I really agree
I
on
think
that.
many expert panel members are here. I think before Santosh leaves here, any questions? Yeah.
Anusua can answer questions. She's asking questions.
I was just interested in understanding why did you open this IJO case reports as a sister journal? Because
Right.
being in an institute practice, we face difficulty in submitting there now because it is not indexed and institute doesn't support.
It will get indexed. So there is no reason why, except that we wanted to give more opportunities for people who write case reports. When I took over, the number of manuscript submissions was 700, 800 plus. When I finished, now Vanati has taken over, it is 3,000 plus, more than that. That is because people have got energized and they want to submit to IJO. But all of them don't have case series or large studies. They still want to submit, and their cases tell a story. Case reports are very interesting. If you publish all that in the major journal, then the journal will have a lot of clutter, noise, isn't it? So if we have a segregation already, then that gives a platform for younger authors or practitioners to submit and publish. Whenever a new journal is started, it is never indexed. It's a process that takes 3 to 5 years. We are in the process. So hopefully in Vanati's term, it should get indexed. And once it is indexed, it's retrospectively indexed. All the articles that are published will get indexed. It will have a high impact factor over maybe 10, 15, 20 years. Case reports, they will never have a very high impact factor. Second, people think that I removed case reports to increase the impact factor. That is absolutely not true, because case reports don't constitute citable articles. When citation index is calculated, the number of case reports doesn't come in the numerator or denominator. Number of citations to case reports or the number of case reports do not constitute the numerator or the denominator where citation index is calculated. So that is not the reason. That's a misconception. It's just that we wanted to give more opportunity and create one more journal. Like every other journal goes through that process. Ophthalmology, case reports, retina, case reports. So ophthalmology has split up into ophthalmology, retina, ophthalmology, glaucoma, ophthalmology, basic sciences. That's the evolution process for any journal. As the manuscripts scale up, you cannot have 95% rejection. So you want to have respectable 20% acceptance, so you scale up your journal.
I think also there are several colleges which do still consider IJO-CR publications enough for their promotions, and is also calculated. So it comes into one of the higher rated non-index publications currently, and if you actually look at the compilation of case reports, I find it quite interesting. It's like you're running through a rapid run-through clinic sitting in one place, and it gives an opportunity for all the beginners to come and share their experience with us, and it's also a learning experience before they go on to write in a more higher standard journal.
But tell you our effect on that. See, every state has started their own journals. Now that has impacted us. So now we are finding it very difficult to get even the case reports to our state journals. Just to share our difficulty with you. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, you are an expert panel. Yeah, please go ahead.
So this is a good opportunity to discuss about publications, and I think nothing better when all of us are here. This is a question to editorial and also to all of us, that technology is a boon and a bane, and in this era of artificial intelligence, it's not very difficult to use, say, something like ChatGPT or Bard and write sections and sections of manuscript, and it will all pass through any plagiarism checkers with some modifications. How do we fail to fall into the trap? And as editors, what would be the message to not sacrifice originality for citations?
Yes, that was a good question.
See, that's a can of worms that you opened. It's come in a big way, but actually there are tools available to check whether an article has been written by ChatGPT or by a human author. And there are tools to even deceive that. There are tools, software tools, apps which are available to transform ChatGPT output into humanized output. So this is a Tom and Jerry kind of a game which keeps going on till one gets better of the other. But that's, in fact, just before I finished my term, I got an article where an author had put ChatGPT as the co-author.
Very honest. It's very honest.
Yes, as you rightly said, it opens up a lot of avenues which we need to look in as editors. And one more question to you, Dr. Santosh. I think I did go through the recent guidelines of American Journal of Ophthalmology, and there in one of the instructions or requirements, the authors are now required to reveal whether they have used a ChatGPT for enhancing their whatever they have submitted, their pictures or their things. So that has now become one of the mandatory things. So my question to you is, if an author is revealing or is saying that that he has used a ChatGPT for enhancing his manuscript, now how do we as editors go about looking at that article?
Nothing really. It's using ChatGPT to enhance the manuscript is just like using a medical editor to enhance the manuscript, which is acceptable. You're just using an artificial intelligence based software to enhance the manuscript, but the manuscript is not written by ChatGPT, right? So there is a difference. So you can always put when you publish it as a standard sentence like that, this manuscript has been enhanced by artificial intelligence tools. So you have to formulate a sentence to put it, but it should not be written by ChatGPT. That's all.
That's right.
So that you should possibly incorporate as a checklist when the submission
so
process.
That's what I'm
this is
looking
absolutely
at.
new.
Yes. We are looking at revising the guidelines or upgrading it to the recent time requirements, and I'll run it by you with all your
No, I haven't
inputs.
checked, but COPE would have already come out with these guidelines.
Okay, sure.
COPE website, please check. I haven't checked it for a while.
I haven't looked at, but I'm just looking at revising our own guidelines to include a lot of things.
If you're COPE compliant, then we are absolutely
yes,
good.
that's part of it because it's already put into our thing. But for our own understanding and bringing it to the knowledge, because many of them do not go back and read the COPE, and I haven't looked at the update on that, so I will also update myself on that.
Even Grammarly, it's used by everybody now.
Yes, so it's basically like an artificial intelligence software
Grammarly
which is used to
absolutely,
which helps us to miss certain grammar, and we are not an English-speaking nation by and large, though we have adopted either the British or the American way of speaking here, but we still do have our faults, and our grammar is not 100% perfect if you look at compare it to a British English, whereas it becomes acceptable when you look at the American English. So,
correct.
So it's a relative factor which is still there, and we still do put in Grammarly, as you rightly said, to improve our language at certain times. So I think we are still learning, and we will learn from each other. And if there are any more questions, yes, Dr. Gopal.
What is this rejection rate, general rejection rate?
She should know currently in IJO.
Rejection rate is around 33%. The acceptance rate up to this October on the number of submissions, the acceptance is around 25-26%.
So rest of them are in the pipeline.
In the pipeline. So it's not an actual thing, because you cannot say there are 3,000, but all 3,000 doesn't get reviewed by October. We still have about a 60% or 65% which is in the pipeline, which is being reviewed. So the review time differs depending upon the review. For a review article would take a longer period of time, whereas an original article will take an intermediate period of time. A case report might be reviewed within 10 days, depending on, again, how the reviewers are getting back to us and how many reviewers are being involved or assigned the task of review.
So next question,
70-30.
Next question. See, first rejection rate reply really demoralizes the author. So what advice you will give them?
No. First rejection.
Yeah. Any submission,
Nobody
immediate rejection.
No. How many times you ask your, husband or wife or child, and they accept? It's 50-50, right? I mean, it's part of human life.
Yeah, that's what I've seen some of them.
Why should you
they
take
just
no
look
as
at
a
that.
discouragement? No is something that will help you pursue it further.
Yes, I think it happens with us also. We have published, but still it is not mandatory that something which I send to Konya is going to go through in Konya, because Konya has changed the way it's looking at things, and it was something absolutely new or if it's innovative, which is probably not good, and I'll have to move it to I'll move it to ocular surface, depending on what is the strength of my subject, and that's where all the points which Dr. Santosh pointed out really helps you to reconsider the scope of every journal, how you would want to move it. So rejection does not mean you have to get rejected.
Some of my members, after 2-3 rejections, they completely demoralized. Afterwards, there will be a quite long gap.
I think the other way of looking at it is to really analyze what were the reasons for rejection and can I work on it to make that better. So looking at the positive side of it rather than looking at because every aspect in life has both positive and negative. It's our approach to it which is probably going to enhance our own selves as a better person.
And she's also has a new initiative of forming state editorial teams or state editorial committees. In your state, if somebody has a problem, a junior faculty or a PG, then they can approach that for optimization of the manuscript. So
suppose no reason is given for rejection, then what should be done next? I mean, it should be resubmitted or suppose
once
the
it is it's rejected, if you feel the comments are such that if there are major flaws in methodology, then that's something which you have to then go back and redo your study to address those flaws. Then that's the only way, which is going to be time consuming. But then when the methodology itself is flawed, it cannot be reconsidered if you're going to raise a query with the author again. But if you feel your statistics were wrong and you could probably correct your statistics, then accordingly, but again that is not going to go down nicely with your reviewers again, because the editor per se cannot say yes, because I am able to see and who the author is and who the reviewer is. So it's not right on my behalf. Then the question of bias always comes in. I cannot really, go. I can to a certain extent say, has the reviewer reviewed all the manuscripts in an unbiased manner without a conflict of interest? That's going to be a major thing. And that way, if I find a person is reviewed with a huge conflict of interest or with sort of a bias, then I can choose, the editor can choose to, sort of not give a lot of leverage to that particular comment which has come in. That's how we step in. But if you feel it is all right in the team, the priority sometimes could have been, like I said, it's a small sample size. It's not enough. Everything else is right. Then you would probably have to move it to another journal. That's where you look at
But never change the numbers and never change the methodology and submit to another journal.
Absolutely.
Because the same reviewer may review for the same other journal.
It's usually
it has been done many times.
It's commonly done, and that's one of the commonest misconduct of publication.
Arvind, you are asking something?
Very enthusiastic about Dr. Honavar's suggestion of having these author workshops, because as also Professor Vanati said, that we are not an English speaking nation, so there are many challenges. Number one is the language. So there are software, Grammarly, again acceptable. There are citation managers which help you save so much of time when there is multiple
when
groups.
we hold those workshops, it should take you from how to do PubMed searching. PubMed searching you can do in 2 minutes.
Correct.
For the same PubMed search, you may spend 2 hours yet not get the information that you want. So that should take you from there to reference management. It's just become so easy now.
True.
So
I think we are
these
all
are
for
tools.
it. Please go ahead and we'll be very happy.
I'm sure
to
Vanati will
share
do all this
experiences.
and more.
Because Arvind is one of our state editorial board committee member. That's why he knows all those things. So any other question from the postgraduates? You have some question? Samira? Yeah.
I wanted to convey the message what Dr. Vanati said, that once there is one rejection, then you get actually a lot of good comments from the reviewers, and you can improve, you can work on those comments and you can improve your manuscript. So next you submit to another journal, the acceptance is very good. So many times it helps, the rejection actually helps to improve your manuscript.
That's right.
See, our state journal editor was strongly recommending us to take all these submitted free papers with the prized papers to encourage them to submit Or as he said, association should take a lead and take that all material and then publish and all. How it works?
It doesn't work because authors then should submit, all these free papers in a printable format. We earlier had that practice in AIO's proceedings. Proceedings actually takes material from all the, presented free papers and publishes it. The quality of manuscripts that was sent were really bad. They would just do a very sketchy manuscript, and just to fulfill the criteria that they should submit a full paper, they would submit. That practice still exists, even under the new Chairperson Scientific Committee, but that doesn't come to the journal. But what rule we have in AIOS is that if it's an award-winning presentation, then the national journal has the first right of rejection, not acceptance. That means that if it's a Rangachari award-winning presentation, then the author should or is encouraged very strongly to submit it to IJO, and IJO has the first right to rejection. That means IJO can accept it or reject it if it is of acceptable quality. But somebody did a study, which I think he has submitted to IJO recently. He has a data of all the presentations of the last 5 years in AIOS conference. How many of them translated into publications? It is less than 5%.
Yeah, that's... Arvind, I think you can discuss with our KN Moti sir. He is very strong believer of that kind, and he is complaining me that I am not gathering all that material. Yeah.
Probably we could discuss what are the merits, because there are two aspects to it. It's just merits.
Then you should actually consider award-winning publications as potential publications, and all the instruction courses as something that would generate a review article.
Right of refusal is a I think first refusal.
So that is one, free paper. The another opportunity or point is the all the thesis work. That is again we are after them to publish and all, but the percentage of people writing paper on that is not very encouraging.
Right.
Is there any advice from your side?
Well, that again calls for workshops. So if they are capable of writing a 200-page thesis, I'm sure they are capable of writing a 12-page article.
Yeah.
So it's just condensing the thesis into the format of an article. And that can easily be taught over the course of, say, 3 or 4 hours in a workshop.
Yeah, that's a strong message to all the postgraduates who are in the hall. With the aim of publishing, you start your work so that automatically your thesis you can write down, and then with one shot you can have 2 birds. I think we are nearing. Any other question? Any other comments from the experts?
Just to conclude on this note, basically it comes down to that if we have to leave behind something as a sustainable legacy, if we can turn it that way, it boils down to those workshops which has to be conducted at the grassroots. That will uplift automatically everything. I totally support that idea. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely we'll take that as a lead, and then we'll start conducting that.
Thank you, sir.
You tell here. Yeah, they are the...
Yeah, that's what we are doing in our institutions. We are encouraging them to convert it into an article.
Yeah.
But most of the times they have got doubts whether to make it a retrospective data or a prospective data. When you want to make it a prospective data, as sir suggested, we have to register it. But will you register it with the board or with the institutional ethical committee board? If you register with that, I think it will have more weight. And always, most of the times, they accept prospective studies where the methodology is defined and time period is defined and the study design is there, and power of the presentation will have a lot of weight. So most of the times they say prospective is better, because if you go to retrospective, especially in government institutions, you don't have a good MRD sections where you can retrieve the data. Again, there will be bias in the data. You try to cook up things. So that may not work well. So if you do a prospective data, build it very well, plan it to publish it like an article with the support of faculty, I think that you can get good journals of that.
Sir, can they submit the paper before the thesis is accepted by the university? No. After the submission, after the acceptance by the university only, they can.
Not submit it.
But
So
I think-
then, once it's accepted, then they'll have very short time before appearing for the
Once a journal
exam.
is accepted, it's like a published article. You can
Oh.
call that your
Yeah.
author of that, and you can claim that your article is published, and you can claim a promotion on that in government system.
So, but in
Suppose IJO
PG
has-
thesis, before the acceptance by this, not
No, no.
allowed to publish.
Not allowed. And in fact, the change has come from Sarojini Devi after, Raman, Srinivas and Ratnam, even Modini for that matter, they started energizing their PGs. I saw a spurt of articles from Sarojini Devi submitted to IJO and getting published. I think there's a huge change there in Sarojini Devi, the way they are looking at manuscripts, etc. They're training their PGs very well.
If there are no more questions, I think we'll conclude. Thank you all the panelists and then all the experts. Thank you.